Hello, everyone. We're so glad to be talking about a caregiver's needs. It's really humbling to speak to you who are such heroes, and we are hopeful that we can share something that's going to encourage you. My name is Sam Shaw, and I have recently gone through several years of providing care for my father as he went through a neurological disease. And I'm here with my mom, Jeanie, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Great. Yes, it's so good to be with you. And my name is Jeanie Shaw, and I provided care for my beloved husband for about 5 years in increasing measure. And we wanted to share about needs for a caregiver today because we do have needs, right? Jesus said in Matthew 11:28-30, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." And I believe that's easier to read than to do and to feel. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is in a caregiver's needs is that yes, we know we need to rest in our souls. We know we need respite. But I think there's something we have to deal with first, at least I did, and that's guilt. We can experience guilt for feeling like we need respite when the one we love and are caring for is the one who is suffering. We're also suffering, though, and we've got to be refreshed. You know, the scriptures tell us to love our neighbor as ourselves. And sometimes we have to learn how to love ourselves to be able to love our neighbor. And that does include being refreshed and getting refreshed. So I thought of a little allegory when I was thinking about this. I was thinking sometimes I would describe it's like Wyndham is trapped in his body. And I thought about, we love to walk in the woods and it'd be like he got caught in this horrible bear trap and he couldn't move. And I couldn't get him out. I couldn't do anything to get him out. And so the only thing I knew to do was to sit there with him. And as I did, I got caught in a littler trap, a fox trap. And so I just, I thought, well, here we are, but I've got to care for him. I've got to meet his needs. And so I released myself from the fox trap to go to be able to find food for him, to feed him. But I felt so guilty as I did that because how could I leave him? How could I do this? But I knew what he needed and I knew I had to get it. And so there's that guilt, I think, that comes from just feeling, why is it that I can be released from this? Why can I go do this and he can't? And so I just had to deal with that to realize, you know what? It is not only okay to get the respite, to be refreshed and to get our needs met, but it's essential. Just like when we get on a plane and the attendant tells us to, in case of air pressure drop, then take the mask and put it on yourself. If you're with a child or someone in need, then put it on them. And it's no different for caregiving. We've got to do that. And we're human. You know, caregivers are human. And taking care of ourselves is not a sign of weakness. It's essential. It's a confirmation of our humanity, actually. And we're going to talk about several things that are helpful in that care, in that respite that we get while we give care. And we're going to go back and forth a little bit in sharing those things. But first, I did want to, in essence, give you permission. I needed that. I needed somebody to give me permission to get respite, to say, you need this. You've got to take a break. And it's okay. And they need us too, because we'll be our better selves for that. So Sam's going to share now.
So I think we all have our own unique challenges and our own unique situations, given the caregiving situation that we're presented with and that we're meeting right now. So my unique challenges is my father became severely limited because of the neurological disease he had. It affected me in significant ways, both as a full-time worker and also as a dad of 3 children who were all under the ages of 6 at the time that the caregiving needs really started to ramp up. And in particular, I had a baby that had recently been born. So I think of those challenges of caregiving, of having my own home, having unique needs as a parent, and then providing to meet caregiving needs as a son, but then also having full-time work obligations. So the challenge, I think, was how could I provide care without hurting other aspects of my life, or without feeling like I was not doing a good job in any area because I was so stretched by some of these needs. And I felt that a lot. That provided a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and difficulty to feel comforted and at peace. So I think, to me, managing those 3 things required a lot of communication and setting of clear expectations. Uh, First, for myself, I had to be honest and go, what are reasonable expectations for me in providing care, recognizing that I have certain obligations that don't go away because of the significant caregiving needs that are present. And so I think the honesty with my mom and my dad as we were going through this about what I could do and how much I wanted to do, but had to manage how can I do that given some of the limitations that I faced. And I think I had to discuss that process also with all the stakeholders, not just my parents and my dad in particular, and my mom as she was the primary caregiver, but also with my home, with my wife, with my kids, and then with my job and with my boss. And that was hard for me. I'm not the greatest at wanting to set clear expectations and communicate. I'd prefer just to let things be. And when facing some of the challenges that we face as caregivers, you have to be very intentional. In life, to be successful, I found I have to be a lot more intentional than my inclinations are to be. But I found that to actually be what I wanted to be in these scenarios, I wanted to be a great son to my father who was ill. I wanted to be a great son to my mother who was so stretched by the caregiving for my father. I wanted also, though, continue to be a great dad and to be a great husband and to be a great employee. And so communication was so key. And I guess I'll hit each one of those areas. So first, with the person that I'm caring for, and then in this case, my mom, who's the primary caregiver, I had to be expressive about where I think I was uniquely set up to meet certain needs. And one of the things that stood out is the comfort that my mom felt when I was present, to actually feel like she didn't have to monitor how things were going. She knew that my dad felt comfortable with me even meeting the very intimate needs that were required because of his illness. She was actually able to step away and get her break when I was providing the care at that time. So I think understanding that I was uniquely qualified for that as a son was really helpful to know what to prioritize and how to set expectations. Um, Also, I was uniquely qualified to give my brother, who was doing caretaking, a lot of the physical lifting. I was able to help provide a break for him as well. So I think understanding where was I uniquely set up to meet needs helped me channel and direct my time and energy to those particular needs. Um, so I think once I understood that, then I needed to talk through with uh, the 2 other areas that are most affected by it, my home and my workplace. And it was so refreshing. One, my wife was so supportive through all this, but having 3 children and being young children, that's a lot to manage in and of itself. And so I think having clear expectations that I had set for what care I would be providing and when I would be providing that care was critical to her being able to support uh, what needs I would be meeting, but also to recognize how I'd be affected by the caregiving I was providing. And I could involve her to help support me without feeling like we're always pulling from each other. We were stretched thin for sure, but having that clear communication about certainly I wanted to be there for my father, that required being stretched beyond what um, I had dealt with before the caregiving needs were present. And then we could game plan and say, how can we each support uh, the areas where we're being stretched, and be able to meet needs in a great way. And then lastly, I think I want to talk about how I dealt with a work situation. That was really difficult to um, one of the areas that I provided care was I spent 2 days a week working from my parents' home, caring for my dad as I also tended to certain work responsibilities. And I found at a certain point I needed to be very expressive to my boss about what specifically I was doing as I was working from my parents' home and the types of needs I was meeting. And I found how supportive uh, she was as I expressed what was going on and the fact that I was still fully committed to meeting my work responsibilities, but involving and letting her in on what I was managing in my personal life, and the flexibility that then I learned that she was comfortable with allowing me. So I didn't always feel stretched like I'm not doing a great job at caring for my father while trying to also manage work at the same time. I feel like I was being pulled in so many directions and not doing well at either one. Once I had clear expectation setting conversations with my boss, I also learned about resources available for me at work, specifically that I could take official time to care for a sick family member. And honestly, if I have any things I wish I did differently, I wish I had not been resistant to embracing some of those opportunities that were available provided by my workplace. I don't know. There's this. My mom shared about the instinct to feel guilty because your needs seem so less important than the person who's going through the severe challenges or illness. And yet, what I found was I don't need to try to be some heroic figure. I should have taken advantage of these work provided hours earlier. And so I think understanding those resources, but to me, I guess the key emphasis in helping avoid the guilt and helping avoid the feeling of like I'm not doing any of these things well as you're stretched by providing care. Clear communication with all those stakeholders and the different aspects of my life that were stretched allowed me to be at peace with the fact that I could fulfill the expectations that I set in each of these areas. So I think that's so critical, is to be realistic and reasonable as you think through your unique situation. Where does it stretch you? Who does that affect because you're stretched? Have clear communication with those that are affected and be reasonable about what you can continue to do, what you can't continue to do, where you need additional flexibility, where you can appeal just for some more support. And I know we maybe have varying degrees and availability of those types of resources. And so that's challenging. You may not have a workplace that offers as much flexibility as mine did. I think though it's recognizing what are your limitations, having communication with the right people, and then feeling comfortable with what you eventually decide and commit to doing. That really gave me a lot of relief as a caregiver. And now I'll bring my mom back in.
Our situations do look different for each of us, but we hope that the things we're sharing today can be applicable to you in various ways as you learn to navigate your own situation. I mentioned the oxygen that we have to put over our face to be able to help others. And I want to describe now, what does that oxygen look like? Because sometimes as caregivers, we don't really have time to think in the wherewithal to know, I don't even know what I need. So I'm going to share with you some things as I look back that helped me so much and that I think are common of oxygen for caregivers. One is sleep. My sleep was interrupted all the time. Wyndham had a CPAP machine that he had, and it constantly leaked and made noise and sounded like a flock of geese wailing, really. And so there were many nights I would be up probably 20, 25 times adjusting that. He'd sleep through it, but I wouldn't. Just a lot. And then I was also in school and working during that time. And so I had late nights where I had to get that work done after he was taken care of. So since sleep is interrupted, I realized I've got to have it. I don't function well without it. So there were times I found I needed to nap. Sometimes when Sam came or somebody came, I could just go out in the car and put the seat down and nap, go drive to a pretty place and nap. But some don't have the flexibility. My work had flexibility with that. But and so sometimes a nap in the driveway is all you can get. But take it if that's what you can get. I also needed to be refreshed spiritually in an extra way. And so I found that every few weeks, when I could get somebody to be here and help, I needed to get away for a few hours to be still, to be refreshed, and to worship. And if that included a worshipful nap, that was okay. But I had to plan ahead for this because someone needed to be with him anytime I was not. Music was a big source of oxygen for me. I gathered a playlist of songs on Trust, and I just downloaded them on a player. I listened to them most every day. Another thing I believe is so important is regular exercise, even a short walk. Even a couple times a day, they provide needed refreshment. And for me, I took up swimming, and swimming laps helped me immensely. There was just something about just, and I'd listen to music while I did it. And yet, I want to say sometimes getting exercise is really the last thing in the world we feel like we want to do, but our bodies need it desperately. The endorphins really help refresh us, and that affects our emotions. I found that healthy eating, I determined to eat healthy during this time, which was a little difficult because the one thing my husband did love while he could still eat was really good food and sweets. And, one bite here, one bite there. But comfort food feels good for a time, but it ends up hurting our health. And, I just say try your best to eat more fruits and vegetables and less sweets. It's hard, but you'll thank yourself later. And then getting outside. God's creation is made for us and for our beauty. And when we are just full of Satan lies of despair, and God isn't with us, He hates us, whatever, sickness and death, getting and to enjoy God's creation is spectacular. Even in inclement weather, which there is a good bit of here in New England, I would take those times. I would drive to somewhere that was pretty if I had time to get to the ocean or somewhere, but just to bask in that and just have it be a refreshment. Also, I think this is important, finding a way to laugh. Um, I had to have that because there's a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, and a lot of sadness. And I searched for funny movies, pieces of comedy. And when and I would watch those, we longed for times of laughter, and we kind of had to make them. I mean, I avoided sad movies, sad books. Uh, I just didn't need that. There was enough sadness. I think journaling as well, I found helpful because we're hurting emotionally in caregiving, and we need to express that. We can live in, at least I know I lived in a doing mode for survival's sake. And it takes an intentional time to emote. But oh, how we need it. I know I just read a lot of the laments in Psalms because it helped me. And to know that God wants to hear what we feel. And I think for many, praying or our feelings or writing our feelings helps us get in touch with them. And sometimes, honestly, I believe I was perhaps closer to God than any time, but at the same time, I didn't have a lot of time and energy to spend a lot of time in the Bible. And it just was, I know you can relate to that. I actually did something that I found really helpful. I'll show it to you. This is, I got actually someone gave it to me, a box of scriptures, and they're just little ones. And when I would go by this, I'd pull one out. And sometimes it was all I could do. And I'll do it now. I didn't pre-plan what one. Oh, but this is a good one. Matthew 28:20. Surely I am with you always to the end of the age. And just getting something from the scriptures was so helpful. You can order those from a Christian bookstore. And the last thing I want to talk about is how to help others help you. I know it can be wearing when someone said, and I'm so appreciative, but sometimes people say, "What can I do?" And as caregivers, we're like, I don't even know how to answer that question. I mean, can I train you for the? But here's what I did, and I actually wrote this. I know it's probably been mentioned in this workshop, but coming out simultaneously with this is a book by the same title of this workshop, The Sacred Journey: Finding God in Caregiving. And I wrote down some practical ideas for supporting caregivers that I suggest that you just copy. And when somebody says, "What can you do?" you can hand them that list. But uh, some of those things are: take initiative to encourage caregivers, offer opportunities that you have thought about more than asking them what they need. It can be exhausting to think through what we as caregivers need. And that's why I'm saying, just hand them a list, or have some things that you can tell them, and be willing to get that help too. For those who wanting to support caregivers, text them to show your support. Just that you're thinking about them. A lot of times for caregivers, a text is honestly easier to manage than a phone call. But don't not call, but ask them if they'd like to talk. Tell them you're reaching out to them, and there's no need to respond, because I've carried guilt for not responding to kind offerings of support when many times I lacked the energy or time to respond. you know, Ask for those who are wanting to help provide needs for caregivers. Ask them, the ones you know well, if they might want to tell you what their everyday routine is like. What's hardest? And these conversations might give you insight into the ways you might encourage them. Offer to say a prayer with them when you visit or call. And even maybe beforehand, read up on the diagnosis or the illness or the situation that the person you are supporting has, um, so that the caregiver doesn't have to explain as much again and again. And I also want to say, if you have the latest and greatest remedy about a new diet, vitamin regimen, or conspiracy theory about the causes of diseases or mental illness, please refrain from pushing any agendas to caregivers. And I probably you're saying, if you're a caregiver listening to this, but we've heard hundreds of them. If you believe something strongly could be helpful, that you found helpful, you can say that, and that you can feel free to ask them about it. But it can be disheartening to a caregiver who has sat through hundreds of hours of expert medical guidance to hear that the reason your loved one is suffering is because of electrical wires or 5G or too many carbs or too little carbs or this or that. And, that's just something that I would say, okay, hand this list to people. You give a gift card to a takeout restaurant. Surprises like those are welcome and make a caregiver feel thought about. Also, for those who are supporting caregivers, think about sending a meal, but find out any dietary restrictions. Offer a couple of choices on what they'd most like to eat, because they might not like it, but they'll appreciate the thought anyway. Um, if possible, try to spend a few hours sitting beside the person being cared for. Offer to read to them, watch a television show with them, or just sit with them so the caregiver can have an hour or two for some needed respite. And send a card of encouragement, text a scripture or prayer, and pray for them. I know when, and let them know that. Have some kind of visual or mental thing that reminds you to pray for them. When my friends Martian and Roger's son David was sick, he was in a band called Brown Bird. And I said, every time I see a brown bird, I'm going to be praying for David, and I want you to know that. Those kind of things, wow, they mean so much. I wrote about my husband on Wednesdays, and a lot of times people say, I think about and pray about you on Wednesday. And then the last thing I want to say is be gracious about a caregiver's limitations, and caregivers, be gracious with yourself about your own limitations. My name is Jeanie, but I am not a genie. I'm not Wonder Woman. We can't do it all, and we can only do what we can do. And be gracious with yourself, and those who are supporting caregivers, be very gracious with them. there's a lot of resources available, and that's another class. There's more also available that you can read about in the book as well. But I hope these are helpful for those of you who are caregivers to really take care of yourselves, to find out what that oxygen is, as well as those who are supporting caregivers to know how to help them. Or if you are that caregiver, that you can say, here's some things you can do, so you don't have to think, oh my goodness, what am I going to tell them? But I hope that you find oxygen and can find that refreshment. You desperately need it. God wants you to find rest for your soul.
She said she's not a genie and not Superwoman. I disagree. I think she is Superwoman. She is amazing. She's inspiring. And I am so blessed to have her as my mom. I'm going to wrap us up with just a discussion of how do we stay hopeful? How did I stay hopeful through the really challenging times of caregiving? And I think that's the most elusive thing, was my experience, is how do you keep hope? My dad's condition was, there was not hope about his physical, physically getting better. That was not something I could put my hope in. And so I'm going to talk about two things: releases and escapes. Right. So I'm going to get to the more spiritual side of hope at some point, but more practically speaking, to have hope, you got to just keep going. And I found that my mom pointed to exercise and music as two big things for her, similar for me. Those are very challenging to find and make time for as you're giving care. And so I had, in addition to being here, providing care for my dad on Tuesdays and Fridays while managing some work as well, I also came late on Wednesday nights to put him to bed. And that was always after a Wednesday night basketball outing that I did within my community. It was the least practical thing to sort out that perhaps I've ever done, because I would come off of a work day and then I would have, family obligations, and then we'd have a church event on Wednesday night, and then I would immediately leave that. Well, I wouldn't leave. I would leave the church event to help not abandon my wife during bedtime, and then I'd get to basketball, and usually it'd be about 9 o'clock, or actually more like 9:20 that I'd get to basketball. It's been a long day. I'm usually up at 5, but I needed competition. I needed to run. I needed to release some of the things, honestly, the energy that was pent up and some of the challenges that came from that. And so then I would come back after doing that, which would usually be around 11:30, to help get my dad ready for bed. And that was really some magical times, honestly. First of all, he loved to hear my stories about, a bunch of dads playing basketball, thinking we could still have our talent. And I love to be able to share those things, because that was such a strong part of our bond as father and son, was our love for sports together. And so prioritizing that, even though it was really not the most practical thing, I was super tired on Thursday because of it. I realized that release helped me to stay engaged emotionally with all that was going on around me. Whereas I had other things that I'd call more escapes, watching TV at night when I was ready for bed. There was just such a desire to check out. And we need escapes. I'm not saying don't ever have escapes, but I found that I needed to balance my releases, positive things that help me cope, and do more of those than the escapes, which were more, again, for my heart and how I work, led to me wanting to disengage more emotionally with my family, with my dad, with my mom. And although sometimes I needed that escape, I tried to minimize that. So assess, what are you seeking right now that's an escape? Are you escaping more than you need to? You're probably going, I wish I could escape. I have no escape. But also think, what are releases? What are things you can do to step away that are going to help energize you? And again, exercise, we found, was so critical for us, my mom and I, as we dealt with so much of the emotional and physical stress that can come with caregiving. And perhaps you have to get creative with that. Perhaps it's going to be really inconvenient to pull that off. That stinks, and I wish it weren't that way as we give care. It's not fair, but I think it can yield such great dividends. So that's, again, a thought on escapes versus releases, and trying to find those releases that'll help energize you and keep you engaged, rather than the escapes that make you think and feel less. Such a challenging thing to work through. Lastly, just I have an encouragement for staying hopeful requires uh, some spiritual work. And for me, I listen to a lot of music, and I also found comfort in lament and psalms, as my mom shared. And I wanted to read in Lamentations 3, in verse 16. I'll start there. It says, "He has broken my teeth with gravel. He has trampled me in the dust. I have been deprived of peace. I have forgotten what prosperity is. So I say, my splendor is gone, and all that I had hoped from the Lord. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me." Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that way for who you're giving care for? Have you ever felt that way for yourself? "Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him." Uh, I can't give you a magical formula for how you can feel hope in your soul when the constant demands, physically and emotionally, are always weighing on you as a caregiver. I don't have that magical formula. I just encourage you to find hope where you can. God provides it. I had to sort out some things with God, because ways I thought he provided me hope were called into question as I saw my dad suffer, and know that it was going to just be a suffering that eventually ended with his death. It was really hard. Um, and it required some hard work, some hard conversations with God. And often it was even on those Wednesday nights when I pull back in my driveway after the longest day of the week, but getting that time of exercise and then spending a little bit of time with my dad at the end of the day. Sometimes I just sit in my driveway from 12:30 a.m. to 1:15 a.m. and just think and just contemplate, God, how does this make sense? And I just kept trying to cling to hope that he is a good God that created us for good, and that he's watching over us. And some of these things, they don't make sense. And I can't make sense of your situation for you, as you couldn't help me make sense of my situation. But I went to God. I found comfort in his creation, in music, in his word. And honestly, the Spirit had to kind of work in my soul to say that, yes, despite what you're looking at and the physical things that you see, taking away any reason for hope, I can still offer you hope. Um, so I think training yourself to have that type of perspective, to always seek to find hope, will hopefully provide you with some of that you need, because hope is the fuel for endurance. If we don't have it, we will not endure. So I'll ask my mom to just come up and wrap up the thoughts.
We're going to have a time now just for you to ask questions. You've been instructed to put some in the chat, or we can talk about some that we think you might have as well. But we so appreciate you. You are heroes. And we know something of what it's like, and it's hard. And God is a gracious God. You're going to have days where you feel like, not only feel guilt for what you can't do, but you feel guilt for thoughts you've had, or just feeling like I can't do this anymore. And God is a gracious God. And just as that scripture I pulled out there said, he will be with us. He'll be with us always. And I'm so grateful for that. So we love being with you, and we'll look forward to just interacting with you now.
Yeah, so we do have the first one. It says, you mentioned guilt in your class. Sometimes I feel like I just want to get away or want it to be over because it's too hard. Then I feel guilty for feeling this way. Any thoughts on how to overcome this guilt?
I would say you are human. And that's so normal. And God understands that, and he understands you. I think the first thing is to be honest like the question we're dealing with says, that yes, sometimes I would, I remember specifically some walks I took around my house when I was saying, I don't know how much longer I can do this, because it was hard, but then feeling the guilt for even thinking that, because what that was meaning, and feeling like I was being so selfish. But I had to be real. I just, I didn't know how much longer I could do it. And I wanted to have that conversation with God. I didn't want it to be something that I carried. And so that my husband would ever feel that. I wanted him to always feel that what I do feel, that it was my greatest privilege to care for him. It was an honor. But I think realize that you're not alone in those feelings, that's very normal, because we are human and we are weak, and that's where we need God and we need each other. And I would just say, give yourself grace with that, but also share with a confidant who can help you, just even pray to get through those things. And it's probably also a sign that you really need some respite when you get to that point. And again, that may be hard for you to figure out, but you got to figure it out. Even, someone in your ministry group, your family group, your neighborhood family, just let them know, I feel like I'm getting near a breaking point, and you'll be surprised what even a little bit of time could do for you in getting that respite. Yes, and I think group support. There are a lot of caregiving groups and helpful resources in that way. Some of those are. There's a group for MSA caregivers that's online. It's a very active group. For some, that's like their only family. Honestly, for me, I go on it now to give support to people who are caregivers, but it was too much for me at the time. It made me too sad. I couldn't deal with everybody else's grief and hardship when I was carrying so much of my own. And so I think you've got to figure out that yourself, but realize that's very normal. But take it to God so that you don't take it to your loved one. And you get the respite that you need.
I did not go to any kind of group support or therapy. Honestly, probably after today, I'm a bit of a mess. I probably will be. It's a lot. But what I did do, I reached out. I'm thinking of a particular friend from college that I did not keep in touch with. That it was about 15 years since then, but I knew it was a friend who had lost their dad, and I had not lost my dad at this point. But I said I need to talk to somebody that's not directly in the situation, but could understand the situation. I don't know if any of you, a lot of the comments I saw shared about the panel were people appreciating vulnerability. And I think there's this instinct we have to not be raw about what we feel. And because those feelings are bad. And yet what I found is if I didn't share what the raw feelings were, then they would just sit there and stay there. And I couldn't flush them out of the system, so to speak. And so I think the scriptures do a great job of showing people be raw, particularly in the Psalms. And what that tells me is that that's how God made us. God made us to have to share the things we feel, and sometimes make us question our humanity because we feel some of these things that are pretty raw. And so I found that honestly, it wasn't probably best to share that necessarily with my mom, or even I didn't want to share that with my wife or my sisters. Or I actually found a friend who was willing to listen to me that was removed from the situation but could understand. And that gave me a lot of support. And it also gave me just an outlet that was safe and a bit removed.
Yeah, so we did have a question about, and you sort of touched on this, but how are you both doing? And is there anything we can pray for you both about?
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Uh, I think, I think I feel honestly like I've grown more through this time than any other time. Again, afterwards, I felt guilt for, after my husband passed away, I felt guilt for leaving for a while for living a normal life. And that's something that, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. Um, that was very real. And, I had to know, I had to just keep remembering I put myself in the other person's place. If it was me that was gone, oh, I would want my family to go on living life. And yet, it's just something, it takes a little bit of time. Because I almost felt like if I'm not almost punishing myself for grieving, then I'm not honoring that person's memory. Well, you're honoring that person's memory by living your life for God and for others, and by really taking what you've been given to give it for others as well. So thank you. It also taught me something day before yesterday, because the first thing I always did in the morning was ask Wyndham how he was, which, that's kind of a silly question when you're in the shape he is, but he'd always tell me, good, good. And I started in the morning just asking God, how are you today, God? How are you feeling? And I almost felt sacrilegious at first doing that, but it was so good for me just to deepen my relationship with God, because, he wants that kind of friendship. And I just told him, I want my goal is what I can do, make you happy. I know he doesn't need me for anything, but I know it's a relational thing. So I digress here.
I guess we do have, well, and then I guess you could just add on to that, because the next question is, how do you spend your days now that you have more freedom?
Different than most. I'm going to say that right now. My mom does a lot of. I don't know. I won't speak for you. She does more than I do, probably, than I would choose to do. But that's a different story. Yeah, I think to me, it's as a disciple of trying to figure out my priorities. What my dad's earlier than expected passing taught me was to be intentional, not just let my life flow. And I know it's still hard for me. Sorry. Just to I don't know, to figure out what is the best path. That's a journey I'm still on, and certainly it involves a lot of dedicating time to my family and to serving in ways that I can serve.
Yeah, and I think Gloria Baird shared something with me, and I love it. And she always said, "Don't ever waste your suffering." And so I try to use what I've been through and things that God has encouraged me with, and others have, to see how I can encourage others. And it's in giving that we receive. That's always the truth. So.
Okay, so we have another question about, so someone says, I'm caring for my mom and my elderly cousin, who are my only personal family I have left. They both live in my home, and I feel like I can't breathe. I can't get away from the responsibilities with them, even with my husband helping. He is wonderful with them. I do feel like I'm at a breaking point. Where do you find the list of groups to assist us in our journey?
Great question. And first of all, I just want to say I am sorry for all the pain that you are feeling. That's a hard position to be in, where you feel like you can't breathe. And I would encourage you to listen to the class on resources, because we put people there who know the answer to those questions. There's places in your community, especially if, if for those who are elderly, but and through all kinds of different situations. If you ask in your community, there you usually can find a group of some kind that can be helpful. There are so many things available I didn't know were available until I started inquiring. And sometimes if you go to just a Facebook caregiving, you can look for caregiving groups and you start asking them questions, and people know a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, you listen later to the one on resources, but also one of the people sharing in the resources, we had a section on hospice and palliative care. And of course, that's nearer when there is no way for the person to get better. But we used hospice services for 8 months and could have done it earlier, and they were a godsend to us. But certainly there's palliative care before that. But I'll also reach out to your primary care physician, others that you know of, to ask for that as well.
That care options, but any care options, people react different ways to those things. I would say in our family, there was a natural resistance to help. That's why that help is there. And I think because the emotions can it clouded us, and we wanted to not admit that we couldn't do everything. And then we also did not want to admit that all that had to be done because of how difficult the situation was. And it took some conversations of people with us, and they had to tread lightly because it was a touchy situation for us, or at least that's how we felt. And I appreciate some of those conversations. I know Carolyn, you're on here. I appreciate Grant having that conversation.
Sometimes it's hard because I don't know, there was something weird in me that felt like if I asked for hospice, that was going to make my husband die earlier. And that made no sense, but it just and I think several people are asking in the chat, somebody's saying medical social workers have tons of resources. That's a great suggestion as well.
And I just want to give a heads up. Unfortunately, we are going to be ending at 1, so we'll try to get through as many more as we can. There was another, someone had a statement about, they said, I can struggle with making sense of what is happening. I have a husband and a 17 and 19-year-old daughters who have a connective tissue disorder, which has wreaked havoc on their health. I keep trying to reconcile it spiritually. My girls' futures look scary to me. My 17-year-old is so angry at God. I keep reminding God of his promises, but he doesn't answer prayers regarding their health. They just get worse. I feel like my caring for myself involves understanding why he doesn't answer the prayers. What's helped you?
I think for me, there were a couple books I read that really helped. One is Shattered Dreams by Larry Crabb. The other is this Prayer Does It Even Matter by Philip Yancey. Elizabeth Lang Thompson has written one called When God Says No. Those were very helpful to me because I had great faith that God could heal my husband. And I know he could, but he said no. And I think I had to realize, prayers, sometimes I feel like their benefit is to help change me as I pray. I know one of the women who wrote a chapter in the book, The Sacred Journey, has a, I think 16-year-old daughter who it's been very, very difficult. And she kind of goes through her angst with this. But I think it's real. The things you're sharing, it's hard, but and again, I think knowing that it is not God's intent for people to suffer and die. That was never his intent. His intent is for us to, live as he created us to be in the garden with him before the fall of humankind. And yet, because we live in this fallen world, the rain falls on the just and unjust. And yet, it is through these things, if we let them, change us, transform us. We don't see the other side. It's kind of like that metamorphosis that's happening when the caterpillar is crawling around and it feels silent in the cocoon, or when we're in the dirt, a seed in the dirt before it's bloomed. We don't know, but it just feels dark. So I would just say openness, vulnerability, and some of those books I read were really, really helpful as well.
I have also, let's see, this one's for Sam. One of our greatest challenges currently with caring for my brother, who's a disabled adult, is prioritizing our marriage. What have you learned in this area, and what would you suggest for helping caretakers to continue to cultivate our marriages?
These are all. I just want to say thank you to my wife and that I love you. Because it's hard. It does. It's not fair that you don't get the chance to dedicate as much time and resources to your marriage as you'd like. And I think I'd emphasize what I said about you may have to acknowledge that this is a time in life where your connection together is just, you can't get as much time as you wanted, but the time that you do decide, you have to give to each other. I still needed to give to my wife, even though I was giving to my dad and giving to my children. I was only going to be able to do that through the help of the Holy Spirit. So I think the conversations, I don't love having conversations about like, hey, let's have a expectation setting conversation. But I think expectation setting conversations say, hey, what can we do? And then I want that to be a priority. So is that, every, I don't know, like I can't even, is that a half an hour once a month where we are on a walk guaranteed? That is, like I'm starting, start low and do something that's realistic, but it has to be a priority. But it's just, we're in a scarce world of, we don't have unlimited time. So I think we have to be very gracious with each other too, because we don't always do it well. I wish I had a clear answer for you, but again, I think our information will be available, that if people had even more context, again, I'm not a magician, but to maybe see if our contexts overlap in any way. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, and we have 3 more minutes, so we're gonna have to close out. I don't know if there's a quick way to answer, if we can fit one more in there. There is a question about what if the one you're helping doesn't want the help?
Yeah, that's very difficult. And I think you have to have conversations and decisions with, probably you have to get a team of advisors around you, of family and doctors, of how much to push through and, make decisions of, look, if you keep trying to get up and you fall every time, or, I know you want to drive, but you can't. Those are things that are going to put them or others in danger. We have to be stronger about. And it's hard because I think we have to somehow let them know and help other people talk to them as well. I think is helpful that's not directly you. Sometimes I hear it better from not their immediate family member, even to help them think of others and help making it easier. We can't control how they respond, and I think that's something important. We can only control our own response and do what we can do, but there's some things we have to push through a little bit harder. Knowing the difference is not always easy. Making those decisions while still showing respect and empathy, not treating them like a child, I think those are important.
Yeah.
I'm sure so many of you in here could add so many things. So, you know, if you want to email me with any things that you're, you know, feel free to do that. I can type my email address, you know, that because we will use the emails from your registration to send you one-time resources. And if, you know, we'll think about any other, you know, continuations of this that you would like or you would suggest, and also we'll get your feedback. So I will just type my email address, be patient with me, but in here, so I realize I can't type and talk at the same time. And it's one, yeah. So yes, if you want to give any feedback or further thoughts. So, but thank you so much. Again, I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you. And I mean, if we heard all the stories of the caregiving that you have done or are doing, it would just be overwhelming. God takes note, he sees, and we need each other. We need to know we're not alone in this. So thank you so much for your sharing with us this morning and afternoon and evening.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I know someone asked, when will these be available, these classes to view? Jeanie, do you know that?
It'll be early next week. We just need a little bit of time to get them all into place. It'll be on the, I know it'll be on the Boston Church of Christ YouTube channel. Again, in the resources, we'll send you, you know, direct link of how to access that. They probably will be on the Hope Worldwide Massachusetts channel as well. So they will be available early next week. I would say probably by Wednesday.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for sending your questions in. Thank you, Jeanie and Sam, for being vulnerable and sharing such a hard story. And yeah, this has been eye-opening for me, and I'm sure very comforting for everyone else. So thank you again. I guess we can close it out.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Remember, you're not alone.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
guys. Love from parents.
Thank you.